Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everybody together again. It's been a while. So I will call the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership to order for Wednesday, March 27, 2 p.m. all partnership meeting. And welcome to everyone. And we do have one member online. We'll handle the procedure to what to do for that in just a second, but we're going to do the roll call for attendance. So, for someone.
Ned Galloway.
Present.
Shannon Mead. Present. Michael Kane. Marie King. Ron Williams.
Present.
Rachel Jones. Jesse Rutherford.
Here.
Diana McKeel. Margaret Claire.
Present.
Keith Smith.
Here.
Christopher Verment.
Here.
Emily Dreyfus. Here. Greg Powell.
Here.
William Park.
Here.
Peter Holman. Shayla Washington. Present. Sunshine Macon.
Here.
Dan Rosenzweig.
Here.
Colette Sheehy. We have Alice Rusher. Here. And Kenny Allison.
Here.
Also online.
Tonight, I believe Diana McKeel may be joining us online as well. But for the moment, we have Dan and Kenny. We need a motion to allow them to participate. Yeah, so moved. There we go. Second, is there a second? Second. All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. So Kenny and Dan, that means, I mean, obviously you can participate, but if any votes happen, you'll be able to vote via the online as well. So she's in the Teams meeting. Sorry, folks, should be using Zoom Teams. Maybe
I can email.
Okay. All right, so we have, first off, we have we can welcome, we have a few new members with us today. We have Emily Dreyfus and Shayla Washington, first full partnership meeting. And we give you an opportunity to say a few things about you, introduce yourself to everybody, and we'll go from there.
My name is Emily Dreyfus, and I'm in an interim role with the Public Housing Association of Residents. And my regular job is as a senior community organizer with Legal Aid Justice Center.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shayla Washington. I'm the executive director of the Blue Ridge Area Coalition for the Homeless, so known as BRAC.
And I think we can just do a quick round, who you are and where you're from, so that we can introduce ourselves.
Jesse Rutherford, Dust Tables.
Margaret Claire, Malcolm County Community Development Foundation. Shannon Mead, Blue Ridge Health District.
Lloyd Snook, Charlottesville City Council.
Ron Williams, Green County Planning Commission.
Christopher Brennett, builder representative. Sunshine Macon, Fremont Housing Alliance.
William Park, Pinnacle Construction.
Greg Powell, architect.
Keith Smith, I am the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission's representative from Fulton County.
Alice Rusher, University of Virginia.
And Ned Galloway, I'm on the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. Kenny, would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Kenny Allison. I am the Virginia Career Works Piedmont Board Chair.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Rosenzweig?
Thank you. I'm Dan Rosenzweig. I'm the President and CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Greater Charlottesville.
We're thrilled to have you guys here at the table with us as we continue our work. And then we also have we would like to welcome a new TJPDC staff member who will be working with the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership, Logan Indy, over here behind, over to the right. So Logan, when did you join again? How long has it been? A month?
January, it's been a couple months.
Just about 2 months. All right. Well, had a few meetings with Logan, so Logan has hit the ground running. And you want to say a few things about your background, Logan, real fast?
Well, I went to finance school at UVA, just graduated the past year, and also got a degree in public policy. And we'll be working across many different fronts, but housing being one of them, so happy to be here.
Very good. And we have Ms. McKeel online. Ms. McKeel, we just had introduced ourselves. You want to give a quick intro to the new folks? You're muted.
Diantha McKeel, Albemarle County, and representing the Regional Transit Partnership.
And forward, since Ms. McKeel was not online when we were doing the resolution to allow electronic participation, we did a motion to allow her to participate.
So I'll amend the previous motion.
We got a motion. Do we have a second? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, Diantha is in the meeting.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda, comments from the public. Comments from the public are limited to no more than 3 minutes per speaker. Do we have anyone in the room who wishes to give public comment today? All right, seeing none, we will close comments from the public. I do not see anybody else logged in online, so we can move past that. Number 4 is our consent agenda and our only action items for today. So the first item, the minutes of the November 8th, 2023 partnership meeting. Any additions or changes there that anybody caught or noted? All right, and then there was also the fiscal year 24 year-to-date financials that were included in the packet. Anything we need to make comments on there? So we can approve both of these as a consent agenda if there are no changes or edits. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The consent agenda is approved. Thank you. Oh, look at that. We got caught up and on time. So we'll move to number 5, new business. The first item, Virginia Housing Report on housing as an economic development strategy. Ruth, are you doing a presentation on this one?
Not so much a presentation, I just wanted to let you all know that Virginia Housing released a report in November on housing as an economic development strategy for Virginia, and it has some pretty clear ties between workforce housing and economic development for the entire state, and some specific best practices and recommendations for each region, including the region that we're in. So if you have not had a chance to see a presentation on it or read the report, I would highly encourage you to do that.
Send us another link.
Yes, I can send you the link.
Would you say there are any key takeaways? I mean, I've seen it, but it's been a while since I've looked at it. But any key takeaways on those sort of recommendations that are relevant?
I think the key takeaway from a staff perspective is that we need to work to align our plans between housing and economic development, and work to get the stakeholders on both sides in the same room and talking more, which is actually why the next presentation is on our comprehensive economic development strategy.
Any other questions? We can move then to that regional economic development plan, or SEDS. And Ruth, you're handling that one as well.
Presentation heavy day. All right, so as I mentioned, we are undergoing a comprehensive economic development strategy, or SEDS, for the region. This was a grant that we had applied for through the USEDA in 2021, and it impacts housing from the economic development side of things for workforce. And so just to let you know, the purpose of the SEDS is to create and promote economic prosperity for the whole region, and unify existing plans into specific strategies and recommendations. We are doing our SEDS in coordination with Rapidan Regional Commission. We procured at the same time the same vendor, and so we're working together, and we actually have a super regional strategies chapter to the SEDS that covers both jurisdictions, and that's actually Go Virginia's Region 9 area. The SEDS is a 5-year document, and we have to provide annual updates to the EDA. And there's potential to access federal funding after adoption for things including transportation, labor, health, not just economic development. The project is well underway. We're towards the end of the project, but the press release is supposed to go out today for the draft plan. It'll be on our website within probably the hour, along with the ability for folks from the public to submit feedback. We, as part of the project, engaged with all of the localities and organizations in the area working in the economic development sector. We gathered demographic data, housing, workforce, and economic indicators to get just baseline information about the local economy, and then held focus groups and site visit with the different jurisdictions to try to get a good understanding of what it's actually like on the ground for businesses. Major takeaways from the data. Virginia's population growth has been good, higher than the US, but our region's population growth has been even higher. Public sector is a strong component of the economy in areas that you would expect. We had major growth in wholesale trade and management of companies and finance and insurance. The top occupations that workers are traveling into the TJPDC region for are teachers, registered nurses, office clerks, and some other low-paying jobs. And there's a strong demand for warehouse and distribution space in the area. And there are not a lot of vacancies. We also looked at the real estate market as well. Looking at employment, we quantified the different job sectors by whether or not they're growing and how that compares with the national average for that type of job. And so you see that government and other public service or other services are leading, meaning they're growing, and they're also outpacing what the rest of the US's average looks like for those types of jobs, whereas retail, trade, and construction are lagging. They're not doing as well as the rest of the US, and they're decreasing here, and then maturing and emerging are similar.
Sorry,
Yeah,
on the previous slide, can you define what location quotient is?
yeah, so that is comparing the number of jobs per capita in our area to the jobs per capita averaged across the country. So if ours is a location quotient of 1, that means that our average number of jobs per capita is the same as the US average. So if it's higher, that means we have more jobs per capita in that category, or if it's below 1, it's lower.
Is it linear? So like location quotient 2.2 under government, is that 220% of 1? Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yes.
For everyone there. And then second question is the share of regions jobs, is that based on job growth? That, like, for example,
Total
government
jobs.
31 point total jobs
Total
altogether.
jobs, yeah.
And does UVA get thrown into government?
Yes.
Okay. There it is. That was from the. Got it.
Other questions at this point?
This is a look at some of the data by commuters into the region. And out of the region. So this one's net commuters. This is you see that the top 4 post-secondary teachers, registered nurses, office clerks, general, and then home health and personal care aides, we have a net positive number of commuters into the region
Does
for
that
those
mean,
types of jobs,
does that mean people who live outside the region coming into the region,
for those jobs.
but not within the region?
Right, so this is the net, so it looks at people leaving the region for those types of jobs, the people coming in, and then the difference is this number here. So those are the top categories. You see the highest number of people commuting for those jobs.
When you say commuting, you mean driving in and out? every day?
Driving in and out, yep.
But you're not like coming in and living usually.
And here's a map view of which localities they're, for those top 4 that they're commuting into the region for. So they're commuting in mostly to Albemarle for those post-secondary teachers, registered nurses, and office clerks or general jobs. And then the lowest number are commuting into Savannah. Okay, this is the flip side. Where do people in the TJPDC region who live here, where do they work? So you see a lot of them are working in the region, but there are also a fair number, 3% commuting to Fairfax, 3% commuting up to Henrico or down to Henrico. You see Orange, Richmond, all other locations, 24%. That's pretty significant.
You know how those stats compare to other regions, either in the Commonwealth or nationally?
I do not. Good question.
That's 2019, so.
Yes, so things have changed a lot since the pandemic, absolutely.
Holy world.
Absolutely. It was the best data that was available at the time. And this is where those people who work in the TJPDC region live. And you see a lot of them do live in our area, in the TJPDC region, but there are a lot that are from Augusta County, Orange, Waynesboro, even Fairfax, and all other locations is 30%. So we do have a good number of people commuting into the region.
That's 40%.
All right, this is a bit different than what I was just showing you. This is about resilience and vulnerability for the community. So this is looking at what are the things that are risks to our economic prosperity, what could be better. And a lot of it has to do with, you know, are there evacuation routes? Are there enough doctors per capita? Are people living near a grocery store or not? And so the things that we are not doing so well at are the infrastructure. So our vulnerability is high for a lot of the jurisdictions, and our resilience is low. So resilience specifically looks at the emergency response and living near a grocery store and near an emergency room and evacuation. And then the social resilience looks at how many nonprofits per capita, are there civic associations, are people participating in voting, things like that.
Ruth, may I ask a question?
Absolutely,
And is housing included in infrastructure?
yes.
Yes. And do you have any idea what percentage of how housing reflects, or what percentage of infrastructure is housing? In other words, how big of this deficit is related to housing?
I don't know. I could send you the detailed information on this, how this is calculated.
Great, thank you.
Yep. This is calculated using a standard tool from the University of Missouri's Community Resilience Assessment tool. All right. As part of the stakeholder input, we engaged with folks during an on-site visit, during focus groups with known stakeholders, and then reviewed the results of a business survey that was put out to the entire community. We looked at the state of the local economy, industry diversity, risks to the economy, infrastructure availability, environment, and economic development resources and partnerships. And just try to get, some qualitative feedback about how are people feeling about all of these areas. This is not based on, data that you could just pull out of a report somewhere. This is absolutely people's direct feedback. And it was vetted by the stakeholder group for, the strategy committee for the SEDS. So we see that in some of the counties in the city of Charlottesville, people are seeing low perceived need or opportunity for growth in some of these categories, and in other areas, there's high perceived need, an opportunity for growth. And really what this means is which areas would we be looking at for potentially asking for funding, applying for grant funds. So you don't want to see green all across the board. That means, we don't need any help. We're doing great.
And are each of these jurisdictions essentially self-reported, so only somebody who lives in green would report around what they perceive in green? So as opposed to me.
Lives in or owns a business in.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, and at the tail end of this project, we had the stakeholder committee identify goals. So major goals supporting economic growth within existing industries while leveraging emerging market opportunities to expand economic potential in the region. It's kind of a no-brainer. The other three were very important to the strategic committee. Implement or adapt industry-focused initiatives that draw on cross-sector collaboration for talent retention, advancement, and attraction. It's very much about your workforce. Promote elements of placemaking to create distinct community identity that is attractive to both businesses and residents. That's very much about tourism. It's a major component of our region's economy, and invest in components of infrastructure that will enable business development opportunities and prepare the region for long-term prosperity and resilience. I've heard time and time again that we lose out on big companies coming to our region because we don't have the infrastructure, and this is addressing that. And sometimes that infrastructure is housing. We don't have the housing stock available to support their workforce. The super regional strategies are somewhat aligned with the Go Virginia topics. Two of the strategies complement Go Virginia topics, including tourism and housing. And like I said, that's a separate chapter. And really just tries to draw on the strengths and needs in both the TJPDC region and the Rappahannock-Rapidan region. So there are certain opportunities for us to collaborate on economic development projects. And who will be advancing these strategies? A lot of groups will have to be coming to the table to help with this. It's not just the PVC. Like I said, the public comment period is actually starting today, goes through April 27th. If you have comments or you want to read the full draft report, please fill out the survey. The report will be sent by email and also be posted on our website. Any questions?
Any different questions? Yes, ma'am.
Not a question, but it is a comment for anybody who's really into the data side of this and your brain starts thinking about wanting more detail. The US Census has a really good interactive on the map tool that can show you inflow and outflow types of jobs from within jurisdictions, within metropolitan statistical areas. within an inflow and outflow of the region, and you can actually manipulate variables. to learn more.
Yes, yeah, one other quick question around the interplay between the two pieces. One is the presentation you just did, and
Yeah.
the one before that around the housing and economic development. Do you foresee as the report gets finalized, I guess it's going up now, but integrating or responding to the recommendations that were identified in the state report?
I would think so. So we have opportunity to, after the SEDS plan is adopted by the TJPDC, and then submit it to the EDA for acceptance, to align our existing housing plans with the SEDS. So we have the home 5-year plan. There's a housing plan for this body that we could both in the next amendment or update to those plans, align some strategies.
Was the survey, more recent than 2019?
The business survey,
Yeah. That you
Yes.
just posed.
that was conducted in October, November.
I'm surprised to see, where the green and various dots were, so many green dots under Charlottesville and Albemarle, especially
Yeah.
under infrastructure. That
Yeah,
was that was surprising too.
Right.
I mean, especially when you said, lots of green is not a great position for, future grants, et cetera, and. I mean, maybe it's just perception, but, infrastructure in terms of economic development, it's that physical infrastructure, it's ease of access, condition of major systems. I mean, it doesn't seem accurate to me.
I will take that as feedback.
And maybe a follow-up to that is, do we know the demographic profile of those who responded?
No.
And that,
It was
that's
anonymous.
that's a layer of that.
Well, and that's interesting because, you may not reach everybody.
Right.
The definition of infrastructure there sounds more like roads and so on than it does housing.
I think a lot of people did interpret it as that and not so much housing.
But still, right? I mean, it's not necessarily a condition of roads, but it's the ability to access and connect and not rely on volumes and all that.
My point was if the word housing were used there, that color would change dramatically. I'm guessing.
Other questions or comments? All right. Thank you. We'll go to the next item, C, Albemarle Developers Incentive December work session and outcomes. This is just simply a quick kind of update. Do we have any? Are we putting the slides up that were in the back that are we just going to?
Whichever you would like.
And you can go through them. I mean, the idea here was this past July, the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors asked and approved asking the Regional Housing Partnership to do a work session convened around developer incentives. That occurred back in July, the first meeting. The work of that got shared with the board, and the follow-up was in December, where the Albemarle County Planning Commission, the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors, and then I think it was around 10 or 11 participants from the development community, the for-profit community. Several of you in the room were participants. Convened to specifically discuss incentives that could help bring affordable units online. There was kind of an endorsement or an idea. There were the three big ones that I recall. Obviously, tax abatement or tax incentives as a main incentive, predictability of process. And the third item was just jump down. Expedited review, I think, was the third, or the timeliness of the process had come up. The tax abatement was the one that got the majority of votes that day from the three different groups of people that were represented around the table. And when we got to in February, I guess it was February 21, the Board of Supervisors did put in place a developer incentive plan. It's specific to rental programs. The board definitely wanted flexibility baked into the plan itself. What the final incentive was that it was a 15% total tax abatement of the total project for the 30-year time frame. And that was to help close the gap of moving from 20%, 15% units at 80% ANI to 20% of units at 60% ANI. The weeks leading up to the final vote had it as low as 10% and incremental, and there was a lot of different versions. But the stated here clearly, it's 15% of the total retail or the total assessment is what the incentive back to the developer would be to help try to close the gap between moving from 15 at 80 to 20 at 60. The flexibility part that I'm talking about that the board endorsed was that this is not something that is like a hard line full stop. If it needs to be discussed and move off of 15%, then that should be shaped out because every project's a little different. And the board was committed to sitting down project by project to hope to understand, because the board wants to get the units online, the developers don't want to lose the money in the move. So that's the idea of the process, having the flexibility to accommodate much for the electeds around the room or brothers who involved in economic development projects is how it works in that world. The process, the board agreed that the developer incentive would be, the developer would know if they had the incentive prior to going to a rezoning. So it would not be post rezoning. You would know that going into the rezoning and agreed to. So then whether or not you get the rezoning goes to the normal process of getting the rezoning to happen. And we've invited developers to come in to meet with both our housing staff and our finance team to discuss individual projects so that you can see if it does or doesn't pencil out or how to make it work. And the board had agreed to, we know that this is going to be a learning phase for us to try to get this incentive program to work. So it's going to take a few of those conversations to determine how to, and if it is going to be workable. But again, like I said, the board did not lock this in a way that doesn't give us some movement as we work on projects. I guess the final thing I would say is that getting the developer incentive piece determined, if the developer would have it, the board agreed to look at its own process between the clerk and the chair to get that conversation figured out quickly. So it just doesn't add a whole nother set of time to the already lengthy process it takes to get a project through a rezoning process. So sit down with the team, you believe the incentive would work, or if it looks like it would work, you would know that, and then just be able to plug that in. And the board has signed off on it before the rezoning even comes forward. This is similar to following a model that existed for the Southwood redevelopment and the performance agreements that came out of that. And I can answer questions on any other particulars, but if you have anybody out there that is interested in looking at individual projects, and I've already had a meeting for one, got some comments from another, but the only way to figure it out is to sit down and look at the individual project and determine process. So long story to get that, the partnership, appreciate the partnership, and letting the ability to take that on behalf of Albemarle County to do the work session. I don't think the board arrives to where they did arrive at without that work, and then the follow-up meeting in December. And it was the first time that the partnership did this on behalf of a locality, kind of be a sounding board on a topic. So the idea is that that should provide at least somewhat of a framework for other localities or other organizations if they want to come to us to do a similar thing on their behalf, that the partnership would be open for doing. Home ownership was not really addressed in this incentive. That's going to take a different effort, if not a whole different approach. And the board recognized that. So the idea with this was focused purely on monthly units. Sunshine?
Just a quick question. I know we discussed during the meeting and you said this in your recap, but I missed it. Which is the duration of the tax abatements?
30 years.
30 years. Okay. Thank you.
So the tax, because it did move within like a 20-day period, timeframes and increments, and what it was actually, it ended up being 15% whole project over the whole time.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then how they calculate that. We'll see. I mean, like I said, the one that I've already set in will. I mean, it's gonna just take some conversation to figure it out if it's going to be what we hope it is or not. So if it's not, then we'll have to figure that out too. But hopefully we'll have some good ones. Any other questions on that or? I guess I would say the takeaway for the partnership is again, like if you have folks in your county or your jurisdictions that are dealing with, it doesn't have to be a developer itself. But if there are different items related to housing policy or housing conundrums at your locality, we're going to speak to another thing here a little bit later in the agenda of how we're going to try to get at some of those. But the partnership is here for you to bring requests to us to help with issues that exist in your neck of the woods. That makes sense. Cool. Right. I miss anything, Rick?
Nope.
Keith, did I miss anything? You got it, sir. All right. We will move to item D under new business, the strategic plan implementation, bylaws, recommendations, funding, and final report. And we do have Neeson Consulting here with us today. This the final report was included in the packet.
It's actually on the table over here if anyone would like a copy. I will be sending it out after the meeting.
Gonna resend them a check, so if they want them, they have them.
I will resend them. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Hello, everybody. So finally at the end of this project, I think. Just so you know, there's a final report that you have a copy of, and I picked out the highlights for the PowerPoint. There are some attachments that go along with it. There also are these two charts. You might remember I went over them before. I'll touch on them high level: bylaw comparison and the research on the membership organizations. And Ruth will resend you a copy of that. I also created a board manual as part of the project, and she's going to put that on the portal on the website. And then the final step will be a letter that will go out to the 8 organizations to share information. So that's the high level. And now I'll go through the presentation, and you can feel free to stop me if you have any questions. I'd rather you stop me when you have the question instead of me waiting until the end, if that's okay. That's it.
What's going on with the bar here?
I might have messed it up when I put my thing on it.
I think it was you.
Yeah, it was me. Sorry.
There we go. All right.
Okay, so let's take this off the table. So we don't mess it up. You did it that time, not me.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna work with this. Nope. You have to use the mouse. Sorry, do I need to use the mouse?
No, you don't need to use the mouse. You can use the arrow.
Oh, I went the wrong way. Okay. Nope. No. Nope.
That's right. There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. So I explained the project outline, but just in case you don't remember, in July, we signed the official contract. The project was based on an RFP that TJPDC put out to through Virginia Housing to help with the implementation of the strategic plan that you guys had just finished. The way that Virginia Housing works is they break the work into 4 modules. The first one was best practices. The second one was innovations. The third one was management. And the fourth is collaborative opportunities. So with the management one, I screened 8 organizations throughout the Commonwealth of similar purpose to CVRHP. You have the list in your, in the final report, but again, there were 2 of the organizations were state organizations. One organization was a membership organization, Hampton Roads Consortium, and then one was not a, it was just like a council, which was in Shenandoah Valley, and they only have members who serve as like volunteer leaders, and they switch off for who's going to run the board, that kind of stuff. So, and then, so the 2 summary charts were created, and then we also did a community survey, which many of you took, to ask questions about communication programs and fee structure. And we also had some non-members identified by Ruth in housing places that we took the survey. One of the outcomes of the survey was that they wanted to include people from from organizations that serve the homeless. So I'm happy to see you here. Thank you. Anyway, and so in the results of my research were suggested changes to the bylaws, membership structure, fee structure, and fee support, and some additional program suggestions. So I'm going to hit the highlights and then feel free to stop me. So in the bylaws, basically, what I found through my research was that when I looked at the number of board members, most organizations had a minimum of 3, and that was that not official board, coalition that I talked about, to a maximum of 23. So you guys are right up there with the highest number. Board makeup, some had a less restrictive board makeup, which was representative from the different regions. Example, Hampton Roads called for equal distribution of public, private, and nonprofit sector, and representation from the Southside, Hampton Roads, Virginia Peninsula, and remaining director from anywhere in the Hampton Roads region. Some of them had no work, residency, or industry requirements. And I point to the Alliance for Housing Solutions in Arlington County in Northern Virginia. They also, most of them had a balanced makeup of race, sex, ethnicity, and geographic, with most of the percentages being from housing providers or homeless assist providers. The ones from the state were a little bit different, but you can see that what your membership representation is very similar. In addition, I looked at term limits, and most of the term limits range from the majority having 3 terms with either 2 or 3 consecutive terms, or 2-year term limits with 2 consecutive terms. As far as officers, term limits and committees, it varied. There were 3 organizations that had nominating governing committees as part of their standing committees. Most of the organizations did have a 1-year term limit for officers, as well as holding office until a successor executive committee member was appointed and qualified, which is what you guys have. As far as draft changes, and these have not been voted on, I know that you guys are still reviewing those, is I recommended reviewing the role of executive committee and the role of board members as outlined in the bylaws. Look at some feasibility of maybe making the executive committee the primary governing board, have other board members transition to your advisory board or leadership council, which as of when I did the report, you guys had not put them into place. I think you're going to start having some meetings with advisory board members with executive committee members there, correct? Yes, discussion groups. And then I also recommended 2 additional representatives from the citizen resident population made up of the urban and rural, maybe 1 from each. And then instead of having, an appointed builder representative, developer representative, design professional, possibly having 1 representative from these areas and alternate based on term limits, the representation. And then as far as health industry is concerned, I wasn't sure if you needed, but you could also have brought it forth by a commissioner or a nonprofit representative, because haven't seen any free clinic on here, so I didn't know if that was a possibility. And then basically just a general less representative makeup to allow for a lot of representation from the community at large.
Question.
Yes.
Why would you decrease the number of people who actually provide the housing? I mean, the design, developer, and contract.
so that we could allow for more. I think that your executive committee and your board is big. And I was suggesting that in order to shrink it a little bit, you'd still get most of the same information if you had a representative that I assume would check in with each of the other groups, and then you'd rotate that person. So
I
it's
think
just,
all three provide a different perspective.
okay, that's fair. You guys would know much better than me. I'm not in the housing industry. I just know enough to be dangerous, unfortunately. So.
Certainly agree with that.
So as far as term limits, again, I think you should think about spelling them out more specifically and if and when you revise the bylaws to include 3-year terms with either 2 or 3 consecutive terms. Also, I think under officers and term limits and committees, possibly consider adding a nominating committee as a standing committee. This could also be part of your governance committee charge, which I'm not sure if that's how it's happening. Implement 1-year term limits for officers that finish at the end of the fiscal year, but they can be renewed. And then I wouldn't change anything to the language around officers holding office until a successor executive committee member is appointed. Questions on that? And again, these are just suggestions that I gathered from the research and when I looked at what other organizations were doing compared to what you guys were doing. So again, the last recommendation to the bylaws was you do have a wonderful advisory board or leadership council that you called out in your bylaws. And I think that some of the members of the board, if you make it smaller, could transition to the advisory board or the leadership council, which this whole process would increase the voices that are heard, increase engagement of members. Also, it might increase some of your financial contributions because in the other groups, a lot of the leadership councils or advisory boards are asked to possibly pay a fee for support, not a large fee, but a small fee that kind of gives them buy-in and helps with the revenue to put on the summits and any kind of networking events.
Well, I think we all agree we want to increase the representation. Whether this is the method or not.
Okay.
Is open for discussion.
That's fair. Want to keep going or? Okay. So as far as the membership survey, that's a little bit different. Again, you were the largest number of board members. Majority had 5. You had the largest number of board members. Majority had 5 to 11. 4 of the organizations had advisory boards or leadership councils. 3 were active, and then the Partnership for Housing Affordability in Richmond has not put theirs in place yet. Only 1, as I said, of the 8 organizations was a membership organization, which was Hampton Roads. They have 250 members who pay $25 or $60, depending on their category, and their benefits range from training, speakers to network events. So obviously they're membership so they can support their budget, but I'm not sure, as you'll see at the end, that there's any kind of other benefit. I would not recommend you guys need to change to a membership structure. One of the leadership councils in Northern Virginia does ask for contributions or dues based on annual revenue, and that's between $500 and $3,200. All the budgets of these organizations are very varying. The council that I talked about in Northern Shenandoah Valley has a very small budget of $6,000 to $700,000 to almost $1 million. I've been doing some additional work with Partnership for Housing Affordability, and their budget is growing by leaps and bounds. The 2 statewide organizations have very large budgets and not comparison to your organizations. Also, as far as staff is concerned, most of the organizations are from Planning District Commission staff who are giving half-time, which is in 5 organizations. I'm sorry, which is, and then there's 5 organizations that have full-time executive director with a small staff. I point to Partnership for Housing Affordability. They have a very large staff, but they also have a housing resource line and some other things that they're doing. They do they have a paid thing from the Planning District Commission that they're doing with grants also. And then funding for the organizations comes mostly from localities, corporate and foundation grants, sponsorships, individuals, and conference fees. So as far as membership is concerned, from what the community survey and the survey that we did with the 8 organizations, Unfortunately, you're probably not going to like this, but most people said that they felt like this was very Charlottesville focused, that they really wanted to see an increased rural participation, include voices from people who have lived experience, more interaction with local developers and builders, did not specify what the introduction would be, but they said that more education around state and local policies. They liked the quarterly newsletter, possible some tweaks to content, but nothing critical. And then add to it the working with the homeless population, one representative organization chosen by them and rotated based on term limits of members. Secondly, I said that the membership, and that includes the advisory board, could be expanded to have just not elected officials, but different management staff from localities, organizations serving senior populations, organizations representing the disability community, possible representatives from departments of social services, from the faith community, and additional rural housing organizations. I think one of the important things that came out of it is that there is a tolerance for fees, not necessarily tied to membership, but some kind of $25 to $250 tiered by type structure, voluntary, of course, but again, it would definitely help the budget. And then I didn't see a reason again to change you guys to be a membership organization, but again, tolerance to charge an annual fee or to ask for an annual fee voluntarily. Question?
Questions there?
So the last thing that I looked at was staffing recommendations, and Ruth is more the expert on this, but we worked closely to kind of look at what some of the other organizations were doing and what needed to be done here on a regular basis. And so these are the responsibilities that are what the staff does. And I think it's broken out by Ruth and the Vista, is that correct? And so some of the responsibilities, I'm not going to read them all, but you know, they do mirror, if you go back to your strategic plan, they do mirror in goal 4, which is totally what this this study was done based on, the implementation on number 4. They totally equate to what that does say. And so if you change the staffing recommendations, instead of a 0.25 full-time person, 10 hours a week, to increase to a full-time employee, then you would have additional possible responsibilities of coordinating the annual biannual housing summit, because I think, is that done by committee right now? Organize regular networking and educational events, which people wanted to see, apply for and administer grants, and then maintain an active toolkit and dashboard. So I think that's all my recommendations. Does anybody have any thoughts, comments? I can go into further detail if you like.
So I will say we are doing some of the things under a lot of things under the additional responsibilities, but sometimes we are needing to charge that time to things other than the RHP because we don't have sufficient budget for it. And the toolkit and dashboard are currently being built out by our Vista, but they cannot be long-term maintained by the Vista.
Questions or comments here? So AmeriCorps Vista is some people or person or people from that organization that are available to do service here.
Yeah, so we have Davey is our AmeriCorps Vista. She is serving with us 35 hours a week for a year. We have applied to be a host site again next year. It's an $8,000 fee for our organization, which is paid for the RHP budget, to have someone come in and serve with us, and they are working on capacity building initiatives. They cannot do normal staff tasks, so they can't, maintain the dashboard and toolkit. Davey is currently doing our marketing and communications, but as a part of building out a marketing and communications plan. So once that plan is built out, she can't do that anymore. We have to have staff do that. So she's currently working through several of the items in our in the RHP strategic plan goals list. but staff will be expected to maintain that going forward.
Any questions or comments? So what kind of budget increase would be necessary to fund the full FTP?
I have that in the report, I think.
Yeah, so the current annual budget for the RHP is about $50,000. A full staff person would be around $58,000. Maybe we looking at increasing the budget. I don't know that we would necessarily be able to increase by a full FTE immediately, because any donations would be donations. It wouldn't be, you know, a fee-based structure unless you guys so choose. So I think we would want to be cautious about how much we would budget for initially,
Right.
and maybe increase it to you know, 3/4 time.
Yeah, there was $100,000 budget when you guys started. That was a startup budget. And then in fiscal year 2024, I think you're projecting a $78,000 budget. Yeah.
Yeah, so this, if you look at the P&L, the financial report that's in the packet, you will see that the budget for this current fiscal year was originally $50,000, and we have overspent it already. Right now, we're looking at about a $78,000 budget for this current fiscal year for the work that we have been doing on behalf of you all.
And the fiscal year runs when to when?
Sorry, it's July 1st through June 30th for the next year. So there's 4 more months left. We're currently at $56,000. We have closed the gap, that expected gap, with local source funds that we receive from localities, but we can't do that every year. We need those funds to be able to respond to other needs in the region.
So if all of your recommended changes were implemented, what's the payoff? What do you expect the outcome?
So the outcome would be, first of all, I think a more possibly representative committee. You wouldn't have a group that you wouldn't have people thinking that it's just all Charlottesville focus would be the high level. Some of the membership could be asked for specific contributions. I don't think people are specifically asked for contributions. So that would be one of the outcomes. As far as the bylaws is concerned, it would be more of a tighter structure with term limits and you know, some of that changes. So basically the outcome would be, you know, what you expected to get out of the strategic plan, which is a more efficient, well-run organization that is working closely to do that, serve the housing needs in this area.
Mr. Chair, one other query. So is the objective today to make motions on recommendations of funding and all that, or is it just purely discussion at this point?
Purely discussion.
So we expect to have an action item in the future
So
after
the
today's
executive committee has been discussing and going through these different recommendations to try to decide or determine where we are with the recommendation to the full bodies, which is what the executive committee is to do. But since we have the final report, we wanted to get this in everybody's brains. You'll hear in the next item on the agenda, the discussion groups piece. This is a new thing that we're going to attempt, is attempting to address some of this, but could also be helpful with what we ultimately recommend.
Okay. Yeah.
But the executive committee has not arrived at a final, like, here's what we think we should do. But we have had 2 rounds of discussion on it thus far. And like I said, you'll kind of see in the next item how we're getting to, hopefully in June, coming forward with a final recommendation out of this. But we'll have a little more information, and potentially both membership and work plan items for your consideration.
The other good thing that I think will come out of this is that the 8 organizations that I spoke to, they all were very interested in networking with each other. And even if that takes place once a year, so that there's other organizations similar to you guys doing this work around the state. So it'd be interesting to have that group meet once or twice a year. And I got one of the state people, Brian Cozio, is willing to kind of captain the ship on that. And so we're going to send the groups the final report and, or I guess they'll be directed to what's online. And if they need further information, they can either call Ruth, or if she gives me permission, I can share some of the information or refer them to her. But I do think that that is a positive outcome that's come out of that, because you know, I've been to a couple of housing summits in Richmond and Fredericksburg from some other work, and I can tell a lot of parallels to things like permanent supportive housing and things that I know you guys are looking at here, tiny house community, that kind of stuff. So I think that would be helpful if, you know, there was more networking instead of silos of you guys doing this and somebody else doing that.
My only thoughts as I kind of interact and kind of been here in the thing while it's happening. You know, one of the most powerful things that we can do is at whatever point, whatever objectives the executive committee, whatever commentary is, whatever's more educated, whatever allows for us to be more educating as a region to the stakeholders of the region as to how these initiatives can move forward. Whatever. My hopes is to not take on the perfect parliamentary procedure of like English rule where 1,000 committees exist. But whatever we can do to shrink that, to get to more education to the community, I think is ultimately the one I would suggest. Point being, the last housing summit that we had was wonderful in terms of talking about the issues. You know, and we're going to talk about the events committee, and I won't go too much into this. But the more solutions we can provide our communities, the better. And the more we can put ink on paper for those solutions, the better. Yeah. That's it.
Thank you. So turn to the seat.
Yeah, just quickly, can you remind me of the 8 organizations? That
It's in the final report, but yes, sorry, one second. If when you get a chance to look at it from page 8 to page 11, but and I also have their demographics and what their audience is, but I compared Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance Partnership for which is in I guess Northern Virginia, obviously, Partnership for Housing Affordability in Richmond, Housing Coalition of Northern Shenandoah, that's the one that's the 3 members. Hampton Roads Housing Consortium, which is the one that's the membership organization. There was another organization in Northern Virginia called Alliance for Housing Solutions. Virginia Housing Alliance, which serves the whole Commonwealth. Central Virginia Housing Coalition in Fredericksburg. And then Housing Forward is another statewide. And they create a resource and reference for advancing racial equity across Virginia's housing spectrum. And they've also published something called a source book, which is an online compendium of housing data, points to help users understanding housing trends. So, you know, these organizations were suggested to me by some by Ruth, some by a woman in Richmond, Erica Sims, who works for the Housing Forward organization, and a couple I knew about because I'd worked with the Fredericksburg Central Virginia Housing, and I've done work with Partnership for Housing Affordability. Then I went on, and I know also Jill Norcross, who does one of the Northern Virginia ones. So when I called them, I asked if there were other organizations that they, you know, thought might be useful. And there probably were, like, I didn't really look at the Southwest as closely as I probably should have, but, you know, at some point, the organization starts to seem similar, so you don't need to, you know, continue to harass people to get in, because it was difficult. A lot of people, for some reason, don't want to share their information, which I don't understand, because it's all transparent information. But again, I worked with what I got, and I think I got a good representation of the groups. When I came in November to present to you, I didn't hear back from anybody that they wanted any other organizations. So I'm happy to still do that if you want, you know, but.
Again, the idea that the executive committee will be coming back with some sort of recommendation in June of what we think will be there. We'll kind of we'll kind of get a peek under the tent in the next agenda item. But all the bylaws, the term limits, all that stuff, the executive committee needs to work that through based on how we've got it set up to bring you something back.
Yeah, most of the work that I do in my consulting, a lot of information comes from Board Source, which is a respected source on nonprofit and for-profit governance. And so they do have some specific things that they recommend on term limits and different things. And again, it's a recommendation because every organization, and I've worked with a lot of them, have a different culture. So what is best practice doesn't mean it has to be best practice for you guys. It's, you know, you have to adopt what you feel is necessary. So, but some of my recommendations were based on best practice, but if that's not your culture, totally not, no, you know, no problem.
Very good. If there's no other questions or comments, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate working with you guys and especially enjoyed working with Ruth. So, thank you very much.
So through the final report, if there are things you want to make comments on, you can forward those to Ruth. So that way, that summary of information then gets in the hands of the executive committee so that will help in the discussion, determining of the final recommendation tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, the next item under new business, item E. We don't have anything on, I wasn't expecting, we don't have anything on like slides or any of that stuff.
No.
We're just making sure I didn't have to follow a word. So discussion groups. The survey, both the survey that we received and the feedback that came back and the recommendations that came from this consulting piece is what served as the brainstorm that the executive committee has now discussed and decided to bring forward to you today. One, you have to agree to participate and approve it, and then we'll have to go to do it. So I'll start with the point of the discussion groups first. There's basically two, and Keith, please, or Greg, please chime in if you feel I'm missing any items or any gaps here. But the two overarching goals of this would be to, one, ID the people that are not at the table or are participating in conversations with the partnership currently. And the foreshadowing of that is if you identify the active folks working on the topic or the content area that aren't already participating with us, that could be the folks that we want here as permanent members that then impacts the membership recommendation that we're looking at from the consulting report. And then the second is to identify potential initiatives that the RHP can work on to get to what Jesse's talking about in terms of educating and helping us deal with housing issues. So this was really born out of a conversation at the executive committee and from the survey specific to the rural topic and the item that you heard in the consulting report that said that it seems like there's a big Charlottesville focus or urban focus. I think Charlottesville, it's not that they're specifically saying the city of Charlottesville, but the urban issue of housing more so than the rural issue of housing. So with that topic and using that as the example, the idea we discussed at the last executive committee was what if we took the current partnership members, found discussion groups. These are not formalized committees. These are not people who ever participate becoming members of the partnership. This is simply finding folks who work in the space or who are interested parties or experts in the discussion group topics, which all we do, an opportunity to come together with partnership members to discuss what are the issues in our region that need to be addressed, and then what is standing in the way of those issues, and then how can the partnership help attack it. So the concept is, let's take the rural, before I go over all 6 categories, but to kind of play out how it worked. There'd be a rural housing discussion group. Folks that would want to participate in that could be whoever. I mean, it's an open volunteer piece. But Kim Highland, she was the last person that we had the conversation about, but would convene as a partnership member, a group of folks that work around rural housing issues, whether they're in the partnership or not. And they would have 3 meetings, this is kind of the format, by the June full partnership meeting. The idea being that these would be Zoom so that they're not convening or having to go somewhere, because like we're trying to reduce as many obstacles as possible to participation. thinking like a 60 to a 90-minute meeting, which we would provide an agenda for the first one to see how it would play out. And that by the time those discussion groups were together, we'd have a networking event for the people participating, identifying issues of the topic area, in this case, the rural. And at the end of the discussion group, they would bring back probably their top 3 initiatives from the rural topic to present to this body to say, can the partnership go after it, attacking that particular item? I'll give you an example of an initiative. It's separate from the discussion groups, but Mr. Smith brought one to the executive committee that this body is a great place to do a fiscal impact analysis or fiscal impact report related to housing in our region. Virginia Housing, Keith is more expert on this, but Virginia Housing did a report back in 2011. And that's obviously been a long time. It seems like local bodies would be interested to see how the fiscal impact analysis in the spirit of the defense industry analysis that Albemarle did with Wells and Cooper, to see what is the impact here in our TJPDC member area. So that could be something that could come out of a discussion group. We think that this body should go do that fiscal impact analysis. So what those items could be in the rural area, I don't know, but that would be the point of the discussion group. So like in my idea of this, at the end, we hope to have identified new folks that aren't with us at the table that we want. As you all know, this is the kind of grassroots thing where they don't have to commit to anything but 3 meetings Zoom wise. They're not signing up for a committee. They're not doing anything like that. But usually the folks that are really engaged and interested and supportive will show themselves in this type of thing. And I think we'll have good folks that we can say, now we would like you to join the partnership, or would you like to participate, which would help us identify how we want the membership recommendations from the consulting piece to play out by June. These are not in any way the 6 topic areas that are just final, but it was again brainstormed that we would have a urban discussion group around housing, a rural discussion group on housing, homelessness discussion group. Then we had we could just stop with those 3. We could do a for-profit discussion group. We could do a nonprofit discussion group. We could do a residential discussion group. And we were thinking of, Greg is always making sure the executive committee and Keith stay true to the 4 pillars of making sure that we have the different folks involved. And there could be a discussion group area there that's outside of those 6. But for sure, I think the rural discussion group, the urban discussion group, and the homeless discussion group are kind of locked in. I think that there's a need for it. We have already been hearing it through the survey. And the folks that are not members, I think, would participate in that type of conversation. Whether the for-profit, nonprofit, or the residential one, because the resident one, finally, frankly, is going to be the heaviest lift. Of how to get folks to participate and who they should be, but that's a possibility. I'll give a brief overview of what I mean by providing an agenda for the discussion groups, where the first of the 3 meetings would be about identifying all the issues, but then the group that is participating would start to vote on which issues are the highest priority. Then the follow-up second meeting and third meeting would be what would it take? What would the action steps need to be to achieve those 2 or 3 items? Then that body comes back to the partnership with, here we think are the 3 top priorities on this particular topic. Here are the action steps of what we think the partnership could do to help achieve or make these things happen. And that's basically the gist of the discussion groups. Today, we're hoping I'll stop here in a moment for questions on the idea, the concept. For questions, if you are okay with this idea moving forward, then we're going to break off quickly into a discussion group area just to say this is the group I want to be in. And kind of identify some point or some captains to say we're going to take this on of identifying the people that need to have the discussion or need to participate. And then when we leave here, we get at it. And we hope that in April, May, and June, before the partnership meetings, we identify the people to have in the discussion groups wide open, but then have to convene. Ruth and staff will be helpful to provide the Zoom logistics. But the partners, those of us sitting around the table will need to be the ones that are saying, all right, we're convening the body, figuring out the meeting times, suggesting the discussion meeting times, and then putting it into play to plan it. All right, I'll stop there. Questions, feedback on the idea? Keith, Craig, jump in if I missed anything.
No, I thought it was very good.
Just a question, I understand 5 of the 6 groups, what is residential?
Resident, people that are
So think about
living
it,
in affordable housing.
think about it as
Meeting.
the people who we serve. That's the fourth pillar.
We do not have any residents that are served by affordable housing currently involved with our group.
We have a bar that's a representative of one of the groups.
But that's gonna be a difficult. If we were to convene a discussion group that was made up of residents, that's going to be that's why I said that would be the difficult piece.
I would almost say that the discussions of those first 5 go to that bottom. If that makes sense, not bottom or top, however you want to visualize that resident group, if that kind of makes sense, like, hey. And without having to say the for-profit say X, the nonprofit say the X. All these other entities, rural says this, urban says this. That's what that group could have really great complementary discussion on. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the overall concept here is to address what William said earlier. To bring more people to the table, but not necessarily be part of the board, part of the commission. So that we could end up with, so for instance, a for-profit group that we're gonna end up having a conversation about the for-profit side, and start running that information uphill to it. So I think to what we just heard on the report, instead of growing the board to be some huge entity, we're trying to break these individual topics down into discussion points, kind of similar to almost like what the planning commission is for your for elected bodies, where we will end up having a conversation, coming up with these couple of bullet points and then running it up the chain of command, where we can get more involvement from either the for-profits or the nonprofits. And my suggestion is I think we should look at all 5, and to Jesse's point, I think the resident end, which is we have to park in the bottom for the
Craig and Mark.
I was just gonna say that the roundtables organized around the Albemarle County incentives discussions were in no small part a for-profit group of people gathered together around the topic. Is that an overstatement?
No, we had some nonprofit too. Yeah, people, practitioners.
Okay, right. The combination of the two.
The intent for that was to have as many people from the 4 pillars as possible.
Yeah.
So the only one that we didn't have really was the individuals that we served.
Margaret and Justin.
I was just thinking that each of these 5 groups should really try hard to implement that resident portion into their groups. Because, resident experience in the rural scenario or, being served by a nonprofit for-profit or whatever is gonna be totally different. So, I mean, if we had a residential group that was separate that from all of these others, it would most likely be from Charlottesville, you're not gonna get any residents. Well, you might, but I doubt.
Yeah.
Can I,
Hold on, Dan, we'll go Jesse, then Dan.
thank you.
I think one thing to kind of arch in the residents, and I know we're doing, obviously we're advocating for the person who's has the housing struggles. And I know this is a side piece, but this particular piece is one I will talk about in the rural context is, how do we overcome the demographics that have vilified residential housing or the demographics that are in need of that housing? Like, I think in that residential piece, like NIMBYism is there. Like, that's the one that overarches it, persuades political, ideologies. It pushes candidates and they get very organized very quickly. Like, you guys have various groups here in Charlottesville that a lot of us don't have in the rural context necessarily. But the equivalent of that is the overarching, those who organize to preserve this region or to whatever that is. I think there's a piece of the resident conversation. How do we throw the NIMBY people in a room so we can talk to them too? Like, I know that's, because ultimately, at the end of the day, what are most special use permits killed by? Well, it's whether it's political or whether it's a good or bad project, whatever it is. One group that who's always organized 100% of the time is the group that's gonna have the petition that they're passing out about preserve rural character of, Whitehall, or of Alma, or of Nelson County, or whatever that is. If we can't start understanding some of their mindset, you almost want to put both those demographics in a room with the unhoused person and that person and say, but this person can afford that, so say it again, Like, and then once you humanize that, I don't know what that means. I mean, I would also be really impressed to see a NIMBY person actually be able to want to say the things that they think in that context, because they wouldn't. But I do think there's, in that residential aspect, if there's a way that we could include that, it helps us create more solutions. Just my 10 cents.
Dan?
Thank you, Ned. Yeah, so first of all, thanks to the executive committee. I really like the approach. I think it's great. In particular, the three main breakdowns, rural, urban, and homeless. Those are three distinct sectors that this large body represents. I honestly don't think that the NGO participants need to get together in yet another ideation group. We get together all the time in every other format. I think we should probably best integrate it into the other groups, probably the same for for the for-profit developers. Overwhelmingly, I would echo what others said, is that integrated into each of these groups should be residents, either residents who are beneficiaries of low-income housing opportunities or people who are searching but can't find them. Without that input, all of us sitting in a room talking together is actually not particularly valuable. But it's the lived experience of people who are finding barriers to accessing safe, decent, affordable housing are really, frankly, the only people we ought to be listening to. And so I would recommend that that each of these groups has a mandate from the housing partnership that you shall have whatever it takes to meet people where they are, to make sure you integrate either recipients or would-be recipients of affordable housing initiatives in their groups.
Thank
Is there any funding available to provide incentives to pay people for the time that they would give to the meetings?
Not at this point. If there was somebody that wanted to donate that, but based on the budget where we're at, we don't have additional funds available beyond doing. And again, this was like anybody could participate. There's no lock or exclusion that says, oh, they don't have to be appointed, or this is a hosting of a discussion group by this body to see what issues rise to the top and give it as a networking opportunity for us to network with people in the space based on the topic area. I appreciate that as an idea, but at this time, no, there's no budget.
I'll just jump in. I think the city, I think, has a lot of experience in boards, committees that have required and tried to get resident engagement. And there's been some successes, but there's been a lot of failures. And it's been a huge challenge. And I would definitely say that the minimum floor, if we're going to get that engagement, is really being intentional about the physical location and having it be physical in person at locations where affordable housing is and people are living, and providing food at those meetings. But above even that, I mean, providing some kind of stipend has really been critical for getting residents to actually participate in those boards and committees. And our city committees that don't provide food, location, or stipend, it's been over a year and you've gotten 0 applicants for those. So I just offer that experience.
Depending on where we were going today to get some residents involved, I think one group that does do a decent job of it, Greg, was it Greg? Somebody mentioned that Impact had reached out to them. Impact does a good job of getting residents, getting feedback and getting participation. But you also have the entire area's congregation. Whether that would go out into the rural areas or not would be impactful there, I don't know. So it could be limited to the urban area for that group. But they would be somebody where I would reach out to and just say, hey, this is what we're attempting to do. Do you have some folks that could help participate? And they could be somebody that could help identify and bring some people to the table. Any other, yes, ma'am?
I'm just thinking ahead, you know, as from the PDC's perspective, if these are the types of activities that the partnership is committed to doing, we need to build those opportunities into the budget. So we need to be thinking about not just what is the budget required for staffing, or what is the budget required for doing a housing summit, but if we want to engage residents and we want to be able to provide food and have space rental where they are and compensate them, then we need to make sure we're thinking far ahead about that so that we can build that into building funds to make that happen.
Good point. So I haven't heard any objections to the idea. Is there anybody that's opposed, or, I mean, this is going to be a kind of a learn as we go type of effort to see how it plays out. Yes, sir.
It certainly not opposition, but I think one of the concerns I have is just having an open-ended meeting and then there being sort of like, what do you think? You know, just sort of like the potential silence of that. So I think it would be helpful as these discussion groups come together, that there are some formalized prompts for them to kind of respond to and help start to catalyze conversation and exploration.
So the idea that I was thinking that first meeting, we would provide you a suggested agenda that would give you kind of, it wouldn't be specific to like topics or maybe not necessarily questions in that area. It could be, we could brainstorm that out. But it would be more about how to run that meeting that day to get to the identity of issues. So I think we'll have a suggested format for the first meeting. And then once those are coming in or done, and we may be able to do the same thing for the second or third. I think after the first one, the second and the third meeting will kind of become clear how to run those.
I would recommend, in addition to what you just shared, I would recommend sort of like constructively provocative, plant some seeds in that first meeting, even if it doesn't necessarily stay aligned with that conversation, but it'll just to get the conversation churning, I think would be constructive.
Very good. I think we'll be able to do that, especially for the first meeting with what's envisioned. Yes, ma'am.
I'm looking into this, but I'm wondering about timing with regards to the budget. If we started them in July, would there be funding available to provide food and make sure we're in a very accessible location? No. Okay.
Well, I mean, if this sparks, if this is a success, then I think it leads us to getting there and figuring out how to make stuff like that happen. And in time for the next particular year, but all the budgets at the localities are already, like the ship has sailed for the next fiscal year in a lot of ways.
I didn't know if the planning district commission.
But if we had something where, because we've done this before, where there was some capacity and the cost was not that great, then there's ways to get at some funding.
And we could accept donations in the meantime as well.
But right now, this is more about, let's see how the grassroots effort pulls together. If we can let's open the door to see who comes in to want to participate. And then at the very least, they could identify in the rural and the urbans, the networking body or the people that are not here talking to us regularly. And let's try to get some of that expertise into the group and see what comes of it. I think this is why the executive committee is waiting for June to do some recommendations on the bylaws. So we think this effort may help us. The issue piece, I think, is the regional partnership. Now that we've done the strategic plan, now that we've done, the review that we received the report on, what's next? Let's get down to doing some things. And it can't just be the executive committee or even this body without the help of everybody else in the space identifying what those things are. So what the body would have to do, if what we would like to try, in the interest of time, we won't break out into the groups, just because that'll kill us here time-wise today. But it sounds to me like there's interest in staying to the three groups, the rural, the urban, and the homelessness issue. And it doesn't sound like there's a great need or push to have to build beyond those three groups. I think it's manageable to focus on those three, especially as this is kind of a pilot, if you would. So if we could identify those three, if we could identify folks here at the table now that would want to participate in those groups, so that we can at least get you notified or get you on paper saying, okay, that's going to be your group. Then Ruth and myself, we can do some work to kind of organize. I mean, you'd be tasked. I want to be very clear. We're asking for everybody's participation here to go, all right, who needs to be involved? If we're going to have a discussion on rural issues, who needs to be at the table? And start just brainstorming out the people that you would want to be there. Then we'd have to do the invitation to them. We'd probably have, I would suggest the captains, if you would determine the first meeting date and time. To just suggest to people that you want to have participate. And then from there, the bodies can figure out date and time of meeting 2 and meeting 3. We could help send out the emails, or we didn't really specifically discuss that, but we can help with that. Again, setting up the Zoom meeting for the discussion group, the suggested first agenda, and we'll incorporate the point that Sunshine made. And then we leave it to you to go and meet, and then we see how it goes. Yes.
One other clarifying question, when is the next RHP meeting?
So it'd be late June, it'd be the final Wednesday of June.
And so the anticipation is that these discussion groups will have met at least once, or how many times?
I was hoping 3, but I'm hoping, I think, if the first meeting is successful, you may get more people that want to be involved in the second meeting. But the second meeting is, your first meeting, you're going to probably identify a top 2 or 3 issues based on the suggested agenda. 2 is going to be now figuring out what can be done about those top 2 or 3. You may not even need a third. But if it continues and is a robust conversation, you could have it. But, we were thinking of trying to get in a monthly meeting before the actual next quarterly meeting, which would be 3. Including 2.
So I heard 2 to 3.
2 to 3. But we're not trying, I've learned that the more you formalize this, which is why we're not calling them committees, which is why we're not calling, people should feel free that they can participate, have free and open discussion on the area that they're joining, report it out. You'll see once you see the suggested agenda of how it will help you. If you come up with 30 issues, well, you can't bring 30 issues back to the committee. But the first agenda is going to help you get from 30 to 3 and how to do it without dictating what the topic is or what the issue is. All right, how best to do this? Can I just go around the room and ask what group you would like to participate in? And Ruth or Logan, can you capture who says what? And then we'll send out some guiding instructions of how to pull this together after today's meeting. So Mr. Rutherford?
Rural.
Margaret?
Can you be on more than one?
I mean, it's not limited. That would be your
I
topic.
don't want to do it, but I'm interested in homelessness and rural,
Okay,
and rural homelessness.
yeah, let's put that down, because it could be a subset of your issue under rural.
I thought when you think, because I was thinking the same thing. Homelessness and rural, so, and rural homelessness, so.
If I'm moving too fast, let me know.
It's a different beach, really.
Ms. Dreyfus,
Urban,
Counselor Snook,
Homelessness.
okay, Ms. Washington,
Homelessness.
Mr. Williams, rural. All right, Mr. Rubin,
Urban? Urban.
all right,
Urban.
all right, Mr. Snook,
Let's do both, urban as well.
all right.
With the caveat that I don't want to recommend Colette for something
Oh, yeah.
this year, I would imagine she'd be urban, but I'd like to confirm that with you.
Yeah, we can do, give it the first go around. Mr. Allison,
I'm homeless.
Mr. Rosenzweig,
Urban and rural, is it okay for me to send a proxy to one of the other one? We have a director of rural housing.
limitations here. We're not putting any, the more the better, frankly, so.
Yeah, so urban and rural.
All right, we got that. Thank you for that. So next step will be, we will put together then an organizing, oh, Michael. Rural. We're gonna get Kenny. Got me used to the. Kenny, we got, you got Kenny, we got Dan.
Dan.
Did I miss anybody?
What about you?
Yeah, Ned yourself.
Diana's on the meeting, so I will, I'll speak to her. My guess is she would go to the urban piece, but I will check in with her.
And you.
Myself, I'm gonna try to make myself available to all three to help kind of guide you in spirit.
Jared, privilege, I have to go someone else ironically.
Good luck.
That's.
In the interest of time, because that was supposed to finish by 3:30. If Ruth, with the help of Ruth and Logan and Keith, we'll get this organized and get this out ASAP so that you guys can get going and running. And best of luck, and I appreciate your support for the idea and your energy and effort to pull it off. So it's gonna be questions, there's gonna be things, but we'll see what it grows into and figure this out. There's no old business today. We have 2 brief staff updates. I believe they're brief. Ruth, the RHP member contact information survey.
Yes, so about a month ago, I sent out a survey form asking folks to update their contact information. It's really short. Thank you to everyone who's already filled it out, but only about half of you have. I'm not gonna name names. But please, I just want to make sure I have your correct title, business, email address and phone number.
You could name names because I don't know if I did or not.
You did.
Okay then.
And it also has an option to name your alternate if you don't already have one or if you need to change your alternate. And then I will also be sending that form out to all of the alternates who are identified. So I have their contact information as well.
Okay.
That's all.
And then the planning for the 25 summit then?
Yes, so staff has begun thinking about the 2025 summit. We would like to form a planning committee with more participation than the last summit had. So there will be an email coming out asking for volunteers to commit to joining the monthly meetings to plan for the summit. Also, just a reminder, and this will be in the email as well, you all are key and absolutely critical to helping find sponsorships for the summit and finding speakers for the summit. So be thinking about who would be good for those different roles. And if you have any great ideas for a theme for the summit, I'd love to hear that too.
Ruth, is this specific to the summit, volunteer time for the summit, not the whole committee?
Yeah.
You can put me down.
Okay.
Right. And you're gonna send out an email request?
It'll be coming from Lori Jean.
And then if you already know that you want to participate, you can communicate that to Ruth. Without waiting for the end.
But I don't want to volunteer, but I do want to acknowledge, I don't know how many people participated in the SAW summit that happened in, I think it was in end of last year, Stanton, Augusta, Waynesboro. I participated because I was invited as a speaker, but there was a 2-day event, so which, is different than we envisioned it previously. But what I found really compelling about that model is that the first day was sort of like the educational day, and the second day was the action day. And I think that was a really intriguing model for how to approach a summit.
How was the attendance?
It was pretty phenomenal. It was like, I don't know the exact count, but if I had to guess, I would say 200 people, from across that region. And it was sort of a kickoff summit, so I think it was energized in part by that. But it was pretty compelling. So maybe worth connecting with those organizers to talk that through them.
Thank you. Well, that brings us to number 8 in our roundtable discussion. So I'm just going to work my way around the room. Since I forgot you were in the last one, Councilor Payne, how about you start us off for the roundtable?
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
No, just briefly, I guess, highlights, the city through our housing advisory committee is working on a land bank ordinance, which will hopefully help the city be able to acquire land for affordable housing. The goal is that a draft of that could be before council sometime this summer. Our zoning ordinance has officially taken effect, although it's obviously way too early to judge how it's working, but for anyone not familiar, basically to highlight increased by right density in most places, a requirement that 10% of units be affordable at 60% of AMI or below for 99 years. And then overlay districts in areas at risk of gentrification. City recently acquired a property and has begun the process of exploring the potential of building a homeless shelter on that site, but there's a long way to go in that process. Budget underway. I think we're essentially near our $10 million goal for affordable housing investments annually. And then finally, I think it's been interesting, this budget tax increases have been contemplated, and it's brought up the conversation again about the city missing over $20 million in revenue because UVA doesn't pay property taxes. And that's an interesting discussion point for housing affordability, both in terms of our ability to make investments, as well as not needing to add cost burdens from tax increases over time.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Allison, we'll jump online and what, any updates for the roundtable today?
Well, the only thing I have is I attended the National Workforce Association Board Forum in Washington, DC the past 3 days. And one of the three main concerns with the job seeker is being safe in their own home space. Some of the issues is that they are homeless, a lot of the job seekers, so they don't feel safe. So they were very reluctant to try to look for a job because they didn't know where to have information sent for them, no address or anything like that. So that was the one thing that was affecting most workforce boards around the nation, is the homelessness problem. The one thing that some of the boards were having an issue with was having some of the local housing assistance places be able to help some of the homeless people when they came to them, when they were referred to them. And there wasn't any synergy between the two. So a relationship between some workforce boards, contractors, and housing assistance agencies need to become stronger so we can help get people off the street so they can have an address so they can apply for a job. That's all I got.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Alice, UVA?
Yeah, so briefly, as you know, we're working with the foundation and our development partners, PHA, for our Piedmont site and preservation of affordable housing, which is COA, on our Worthington 10 site, and the community engagement process is beginning on both of those sites. At February 7th public hearing, the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors unanimously approved the foundation zoning application for North Fork. So this approval will allow for residential use under the neighborhood model district guidelines. So thank you very much. And we're working on an RFQ and RFP for that proposal that will go out probably towards the end of summer, early fall.
Could be up to what, 1,400 units?
It could be.
Maxes out. Mr. Smith?
The fact that we got 15 minutes, I'll kind of keep this a little brief, which is a rarity in my world. So to play off a little bit about what Jesse mentioned about the NIMBYism, and then the comments that you made about this proposal throwing out that this body tackles, I'm calling it an ROI, but it could be a fiscal impact analysis where we look at it regionally, and then going through some of the presentations we had from SEDS, where we look at regionally what is the actual impact on housing in a direct, indirect, and an induced manner, it will weave in economic development. But we should look at it from my perspective regionally than each individual jurisdiction. Because to Jesse's comments, you know, the idea here is to generate a report where it actually speaks to what does housing produce or does not produce for a particular jurisdiction. So there's a report there. So particularly the electeds can look at that and know that, okay, housing ultimately brings this much. Now, do we have a Greene County representative here today? Yeah, so it's very interesting. Greene County is the only local jurisdiction on any rezoning, correct me if I'm wrong, fellas, that require a fiscal impact analysis on a development. So it's very similar to what Greene has in its ordinances. So it's something I'm going to continue to push. I think it's a good thing for this body. I think it was built for it in regionality. So more to come a little bit down the road.
Thank you, sir. Greg?
Well, the new zoning is creating quite a lot of activity. It's very exciting. Everybody clearly has heard that it means increased density. People are not quite hearing as loudly the affordable side of things. I've been asked to look at 6 sites in the last 2 weeks that have directly resulted in increased zoning, which I think is very beneficial. I think that neighborhood development services are going to feel a great wave as we all try to understand what it means, including them in some cases, I'm sure. And I hope that now that they're finished producing the document, that the staff can handle what will be a surge, I think, in the short term. I think in the county side, putting the incentives in place, you're probably seeing some surge more with the housing and finance side of things than the planning. You know, kudos to both jurisdictions for creating, I think, an encouragement for increased development, which we've all got to be clever in figuring out how the increased overall development means increased affordability.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Park?
We have a number of projects going on around this state, West Virginia. The 2 that have affordability component, 124 units in Fluvanna County, providing the new traffic circle, 100% and 60%. And in Winchester, we have a 200 unit project up there, 20% at 80, and they both should be done in the summertime.
That's fantastic. Sunshine?
Try to keep this quick. So Kindlewood Phase 1 completed construction, 106 apartments at the end of last year, 2023. Phase 2, we had hoped to start construction this spring, but some funding red tape has gotten in our way, so it's more likely going to be the second half of the year. But that'll be another 105 units to get started there, including home ownership for the first time in Kindlewood, Friendship Court. We have 2 projects in the north downtown Park Street area that are in various stages of planning, either funding application or, you know, a year away or so from starting construction. We're working on a project at 501 Cherry in the Fikeville neighborhood. It's a combination of affordable housing, new commercial space for the Music Resource Center, a nonprofit music organization, and hopefully a new neighborhood scale grocery there. And then working with UVA on the Piedmont site, and we're gearing up on both rezoning of that site as well as community engagement. And then in partnership with the Piedmont Community Land Trust, it really accelerated our efforts around looking at acquisition rehab in existing neighborhoods experiencing major gentrification pressures to preserve long-term home affordability.
Great, thank you.
Can I thank you, Sunshine. So I'm going to take my commission hat off and put my land trust hat on here, and just a little bit of an announcement. We're doing 2 projects in rural Fluvanna County, which is exciting. We bought 2 homes putting a little bit of money into them and we're reselling them and capping out at the 80% AMI. So this can be done in the rural counties, folks. Just requires a little bit of capital and money, which all things do, but I just wanted to share that I missed out on my list.
Christopher?
From a building perspective, materials availability does not seem to be an issue anymore. Labor locally does seem to still be an issue. We are importing labor talent from Richmond and Fredericksburg with some successes. Those markets perhaps had slowed a little, whereas I think our shortages is indicated in the SEDS report supports lack of construction labor. Permit turnaround has not been as big a burden, although we haven't seen improvements. I'm gonna say, individually as Vermonte Homes from Albemarle County to the level that we might hope that it could improve to, but we are aware that it's a process and roundtables ensue. I think a new piece of information for this body, I'm volunteering now for the Carr Foundation. There's more than there's time for me to share about that, but the Carr Foundation did hire Dave Norris as the executive director. Dave has probably had conversations with key stakeholders at the table here, and that will ensue. But Dave has recently shared his understanding of what might be some appropriate programmatic goals for the Carr Foundation in the near future. They focus on funding, volunteer engagement, awareness raising, and advocacy. I believe that the Carr Foundation is in a unique juxtaposition to Carr. While they are separate, they do have access to the members of Carr, which is a broad membership, and they in turn have their extended network of resources. And I believe that reach has the potential to provide great good from a funding perspective. And I would be happy to be a liaison.
Great, thank you, sir. Swings? I'm not sure what to focus on. We have a number of, in terms of housing capacity, we have a number of developments underway in green. They're all definitely, most definitely on the for-profit end of the spectrum. There's nothing that I can really point to that has anything allocated out for affordable housing. With the possible exception of there is a 500 unit development adjacent to the town of Standardsville that splits between the town and the county. The parcel by right will allow 500 units. The developer approached us for a rezone to PUD that would allow for some higher density housing types to be put in place with better affordability. Interestingly, the town section of this approved that. The county denied it. The developer can still free to build single family homes in the county portion of this. Town has been appealing to the county to try and change their mind on that. And one of the things that's a critical element of this is an entrance to this that would connect directly to the US 33 bypass. So it's still a little bit TBD on how this is all going to play out, but it's at least a little glimmer of hope in an area that's sort of stagnant, and this could be a pretty big infusion right there in Standardsville. Another thing of note, just a curiosity here, is that the county has now updated their website to include public review or public availability to review preliminary site plans of all the major developments that are going on in the county. I find it personally very useful, and people in the county seem to have gotten wind of it and are paying attention to it, and it kind of answers a lot of questions for people that are concerned about what's being built in the county and how's it going to affect me and what's it going to look like and those sorts of things. So it's useful. It's on the county website. Check that out. Thank you, sir. Swatching?
So BRAC is currently in the initial stages of some talks for flex funding for creating some hopefully at least one new position per street outreach. Currently, we're pretty maxed at 2 half-time positions that are currently tied to Region 10. So my goal is to create at least one full-time position that can be more generic in the street outreach that we do for people experiencing homelessness and not have it tied to any one direct service provider. So that's in the works. I'm also applying for some funding, flex funding, that could hopefully do some landlord engagement for people who are unhoused specifically. My target population right now is veterans, English veterans. So if you or anyone you know has some properties or that are for rent, that would be willing to house folks who are unhoused and specifically in the veteran population, I'd love to talk to you. So working on some landlord engagement, flex funding and outreach flex funding right now. And hopefully that will create some better housing opportunities for unhoused folks in the community.
Thank you very much. Councilor Snow?
I have nothing to add to what Michael.
Very good. Ms. Curtis?
The Public Housing Association of Residents is mainly involved with public housing redevelopment. And there are 4 neighborhoods that are currently in the process of redevelopment planning or undergoing redevelopment. And FAR works to support resident involvement in that process, which is very vibrant. We have at least monthly meetings at every site. Most of the sites have twice a month meetings, sometimes weekly meetings, depending on what's happening. And the key there is the financial incentive. And the other thing I wanted to note is concern about addiction prevention, because Charlottesville City and Albemarle County have been providing emergency assistance. The money is really running low, and the actual allocation seems to be quite low in this. For the city is where I know the number. I don't actually know the number for the county, but I've heard that it's been reduced. But in the city, the average assistance is $741, and most families are paying approximately $2,000 in the city for housing. So it's really not sufficient to help people avoid displacement and homelessness.
Just real quick, the city's total funding is $1 million total, but it's a 2,000 annual max, and it's absolutely right that for a lot of families, that's not even enough maybe for 1 month.
Right.
In the county, I believe our budgeted amount was 240. The request to increase it, because I mean, we're still working through the budget. It's on the list of discussion, or so no decision yet on whether or not will be increased or not.
Thanks.
Ms. Mead?
So I would say, for the health department, as everyone knows, we oversee a program called HOPWA, which is housing opportunities for people who are living with HIV. So I would definitely say, if you guys are interacting with any community members who actually disclose to you that they actually have the HIV diagnosis and they're having a housing challenge, to definitely refer them over to me. So then that way we can definitely help them try to get into housing. But also, we are looking for landlords. You know, there are a lot of people who need housing and not a lot of, you know, inventory. So, and we go throughout the district, including Buckingham. So if anyone knows of any landlords who might be interested in actually helping house any of my clients or any future clients, definitely let me know as well.
Is that the money or?
Yeah, so basically we're
You pay for their rent?
yeah, so basically HOPWA. HOPWA is basically thought of the same way as like Section 8 or housing choice. So basically we'll pay a portion, they'll pay a portion, depending on that person can come. So, yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Claire?
So the counties, I don't really want to speak for the county, but I'll speak as a person who lives in the county. They just had their final public hearing for the comprehensive plan, which is kind of exciting. They'll be voting it in the next month, I think, or in April, and then work starts on the zoning ordinance, and you know, it's you guys all have. This is the first time we've ever had a chapter on housing. So you know, we've come a long way there, and so I'm kind of excited about being kind of in the mix of the people that are talking about, you know, what is going to happen there and else. And also, we are as NCC, yeah, I'm going to try to sell a lot. We rent probably 7 single family homes, going to try to convert those into sales. selling one to the tenants that are living it now. Another one, I'm gonna sell, I just bought another little house and I'm gonna make it sell also for, basically at cost, you know, whatever we can do. So, we are trying to do one little house at a time out there in the rural, area. And, I just finished my strategic plan as well, which helps us, you know, as you guys know, if you're going in this, arena, help us decide what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, which helps me because I have a tendency to do as much as I can do, so, which is all over the place. So, and then I'm gonna do capacity building after that, so, I'm very excited. Yeah, things are happening.
Thank you. And Albemarle, several of the things that I would have reviewed have already been stated, so I don't need to repeat them. I would just re-emphasize that if you are a developer, you have questions, concerns, what have you about the developer incentive program, to reach out. The board and our housing and finance staff have committed to helping sit down, talking specifics to address this. So please take advantage of that. If you need help coordinating, I'd be more than happy to do that from my seat. We have the next executive committee meeting. Was there any other things that you wanted to throw out there? Couple minutes past. The next executive committee meeting is April 24th. The full partnership, the next one is June 26th. And be on the lookout for those emails. I'm looking for the volunteers for the 25 Summit Event Committee. And then the instructions to kick off the discussion group. I mean, I think we'll turn that around as soon as possible, but we don't have a follow-up meeting out of here yet scheduled, which Ruth and I and Keith will get set up. But just want to say it's been good to see everybody all around the table again. So thank you for your participation today and for everything that you're doing each day. And look forward to seeing you, if not before June, at the June meeting. And listening into your sessions. Correct? Thank you all. Without objection, we are adjourned. Here to best goal.
Take care.
Thank you.